Hey Deckers, today I've got another performance roundup for you featuring Kingdom Hearts 1.5 to 2.5 and 2.8, Monster Hunter Stories, Drug Dealer Simulator 2, Night of the Dead, and Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. Kicking things off then with Monster Hunter Stories, this is running fantastically well out of the box, getting a perfect 90 frames per second on the Steam Deck OLED, so you're going to get a good capped 60 on the Steam Deck LCD. If we do uncap it running around, we can get up to 120 frames per second. However, I actually recommend capping the frame rate in game to 45 to save on that wattage and extend your playtime. Unfortunately, it does appear to only be at 1280 by 720, but capping this at 45 frames per second will bring that wattage right down to around the 14 watts mark out in the open world, meaning you're going to get a good 3.5 to 4 hours battery life very happily. Now in some of the battles it does actually drop below 13 watts, extending that up a little bit, so it will vary greatly, but keeping it at 45 frames per second will give you a very stable experience that you're not really going to miss out on those frames, and you can just enjoy a very different take on Monster Hunter as a series. Next up we have Drug Dealer Simulator 2. Now huge thanks for giving us a key to test this one out, however it does not run fantastically well at all. This struggles at the very best to hold even 25 frames per second a lot of the time, let alone 30. Although if you are used to some of the stuttering, especially with the advanced engines now on the deck, you can still play it, though it's really not the best experience. And this is running on pretty much the lowest graphics settings as well. And if we look at the top of the hill here, as we go around, not only are we pushing 22 watts as well, and it doesn't support controller either, so you will need a keyboard and mouse layout. Although the base layout actually does quite well, we do need just that Z key mapped for a few actions, and there's no community layouts for this at this time. But overall it's not a great experience on the Steam Deck as it is. However, this was added to GeForce Now, which you can see on the screen now. So this is running GeForce Now on the Steam Deck, so you have to get a perfect 60 frames per second because of the cap on the Chrome browser. And I'll link in the description below how to run GeForce Now on the Steam Deck. So if you do want to subscribe, play this at its full glory, and as you can see, it looks a lot better at high graphic settings on GeForce Now streamed. Then check out the link in the description below. Kingdom Hearts 1.5 is running absolutely perfect out of the box. It doesn't really have much it doesn't have anything at all in the way of graphic settings, and I didn't have any issues playing through this. This is 1.5, but it's the same graphic settings for all of them up to 2.5, and then we also have the same with Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Prologue. All of these games have the same settings, maxed out because there aren't really anything to choose from, but running at a perfect 60 or 90 frames per second. Now I did cap this at 60 just to keep that wattage down a little bit more, and as you can see we're capping out around 9 watts, and you can get a good 5 to 6 hours gameplay running these ones through. Now I have a dedicated video for Kingdom Hearts 3 as that does require some tweaking, as it does have more graphic settings, so check out the video for that one. Next up we have Night of the Dead. Huge thanks again for giving us a key to test this one out on the deck. Another one that doesn't really have proper controller support and needs to be running at pretty much the lowest graphics. If we try with the medium preset initially here, you'll see why. Another one with major graphics engine updates. However, this isn't available on any of the streaming platforms yet, so it's as good as we get on the deck. Unfortunately, it doesn't hold 30 frames per second at medium, although it does look quite nice, and this is where I would want to be playing this game. It really is a little bit frustrating that even running around, we dip into the low 20s quite often. And even doing basic actions like chopping trees, we can't even hold 30 frames per second. However, if we do drop this down to the low preset, which does require a full game restart unfortunately, and I mean a full game restart, you have to completely exit out and start it back up again, and it's not the fastest of games to load either. Although it does have multiplayer, and I was able to get online without turning the anti-cheat off, it is definitely better to play this locally for now, especially as it's incredibly involved in all of its survival mechanics. As you can see, it doesn't actually look too bad on low graphics and does hold between 30 to 40 frames per second pretty solid. Character models look a little bit dodgy and the grass can look a little bit flaky, in some areas on these settings moving around, but it does make the game playable and actually fairly enjoyable. But like I said, it's really involved, and the just kind of building it up for the first night can take a few hours, so bear that in mind. And I know a lot of people compare this to 7 Days to Die, but I think that this actually has better graphics than that, although it is just as involved, but with a more clunky menu system, which can be somewhat frustrating, especially with only half controller support and not for in the menus. So better off using a community mapping for this one, which you can see on the screen, which is not a bad one that I started using, but you still may want to tweak it for your purposes. Last up, we've got Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, and this is still doing quite well in the charts, and as a turn-based strategy, this has a ton of dialogue that I was not expecting, and most of it voiced as well, which makes a refreshing change. But as far as the graphics is concerned, it doesn't hold, though it does have a graphics preset for Steam Deck, which actually I left alone because apart from a couple of minor tweaks for film grain and stuff, as it did actually run quite nicely, although it does only bounce between 30 and 40 frames per second with some dips here and there. The look and feel of this game as it is out of the box is actually really nice, unlike some of the other games that I've tried, and this is one of those games that you really don't need a ton of frames per second, and you do want that visual quality because you are involved at that low level a lot of the time. Now that dip that you saw there down to 24 frames per second is actually part of the game, it's not the game lagging. So again, only holding around 30 to 40 frames per second is absolutely fine, but you can still see it's capping out at around 22 watts. So you do want to cap this at 30 on the Steam Deck itself, try and bring that wattage down just a little bit, but you are only going to be pushing around 3 to 3.5 hours max on this, even with the low frames per second. Let us know if you're going to be diving into any of these games, and especially as the Steam sale is now on, I will be doing a Steam sale video. And don't forget to check out the Steam Deck Companion app on the iOS and Android app stores as well. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Thunders under the burden of hopes, unshield